anniversary of the annual Phius North American Passive House Conference. So for the time being, we pulled out the most favorite sessions of our conference. You guys all are always very complimentary of the Hootenannies because they're a bit more interactive and a bit more fun. And they are supposed to be that. You're supposed to heckle you guys in the audience. We present you with a panel of accomplished pioneering architects tonight. And they are willing and happy and here to share their experiences. Please poke some holes and be provocative, and let's have a really nice conversation and talk about our lessons learned. A few more announcements you might have noticed on the website. This year we're partnering with Illinois NOMA, with the Illinois NOMA chapter. This is the National Organization of Minority Architects, and some of you might have noticed that our community also is in dire need of some more diversity. So this is what we're doing to help that out. We are trying to bring in younger folks and more diverse folks into our community. So you can still donate. All donations are going to be split with NOMA in Illinois here, and hopefully next year we might be able to partner with the national NOMA organization as well in our conference. A few things in terms of logistics. This session is being recorded, and the session also earns continued education credits, AIA and Phius continued education credits, and the self-reporting information will be shown during this presentation multiple times. And with that, no further ado, I'd like to introduce our MC today. We have the great pleasure that Terrell Wong from Canada has accepted our invitation to host and walk us through the Hootenanny of the architects. Herself, great pioneer, early instigator of Passive House and founder of Passive Buildings Canada, and also in her own right, paving the path for some pretty challenging building materials, natural building materials. A few years back, she made some real waves with her fantastic passive house in the cold climate of Canada, made from Firewall, which is structurally insulated rammed earth material. Totally cool. So hopefully we'll see some of that work. Terrell, take it away.
Okay, great. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm trying to run some slide share here for your education things. It's trying also to read all my notes here. So welcome everybody to the Architects Hootenanny. It's been a privilege to get to know these architects. This has been the best part of, other than probably getting a little extra time to talk to all these architects. The 6 panelists, including myself, have such diverse methods and their concepts and the way they work, but yet they all find themselves drawn to the passive house path. And so we're going to get to talk to them this evening, learn a little bit more about this evening. I spoke to each of them, asking a series of what seemed to be random questions, but unbeknownst to them, I have been also cyber stalking them this week. I know everyone else has done it too, so, you know, like a little help. Anyway, we will give each panelist a brief introduction based on what I have gleaned, and then they have the Herculean task of showing 20 slides, and they get 20 seconds per slides. To give you perspective, take 3 really rich architectural sentences and say them as fast as an auctioneer would to get the idea of what they have to do. Then remove all the superfluous words so that you end up with a rough draft for what a haiku poem. So now let me introduce our first speaker. I'm going to stop my share and allow him to start sharing. It is Matt Fine. So Matt, can you share your screen, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Second here.
So Matt has been following the passive house path actively for 13 years, focusing on multifamily residential and high performance homes. He works at Peabody Architects in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you Google the address, it's really quite a nice residential neighborhood. The project he feels most mixed emotions for, with its large challenges and innovations, was the retrofit of a 1967 masonry multi-unit residential building, the Weinberg Commons. When not toiling away thinking about supreme interior comfort with the integration of mechanicals and the envelope, you might find him at home riding a bike. Under the category of damn, wish I had designed that, the symmetry and simplicity of Louis Kahn's Exeter Library was first on his list. His thoughts on 2020 and the pandemic. Matt is just so grateful to be able to continue safely at home while others are suiting up and on the front line. So let's warm welcome to Matt Fine and his talk on passive house architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrell. Okay, the Pechakucha format is going to be a sprint for me, so I'm going to do my best here. I come to high performance and passive house design through a lens of preservation. My youth was spent in the outdoors, a good portion of that. And I took away an appreciation for our resources, and I really wanted to, in my career, even though I would be making things, I wanted to preserve as much as possible. The region is in the mixed humid climate of the mid-Atlantic. We practice in 125 miles of radius, but most of our projects are within the beltway of Washington, D.C. It's an area of polarities. It's an area of wealth and poverty, of unaffordability, and of a tough climate to work within with a mixed humid climate. Unfortunately, things change too slow around here. And so we're trying to make that scale jump and that velocity happen a little better. We have a legacy of mid-century masonry buildings in the region that are inefficient to begin with, and pretty dense development. So the lots are sparse and usually difficult. We also have high-end construction, infill generally, but budgets are still difficult. So we still have to optimize the high-performance designs for these lots. In 2008, when the economic recession happened, I was fortunate to be in affordable housing at the time, and there was steady jobs still in this region. The pipeline for affordable work is slow. I began with DC Habitat for Humanity's Ivy City project, and the project that Terrell mentioned is the Weinberg Commons project, which was a masonry retrofit of 60 eras affordable buildings, 36 units in all. And we really saw this as a scale jump from doing one-off single-family passive houses, and really kind of a demonstration project that we could show that we could use these old buildings, not disrupt community, not disrupt neighborhoods, but still deliver high performance. On the other end of the spectrum, in Peabody Architects, we're still working on high-end residential. And so this was kind of a playground, if you will, for us to take the lessons learned of those difficult projects and say, how can we refine this? How can we optimize interior comfort? How can we make a more delightful space? How can we bring the outdoors indoors more so, where we can control solar gains and really deliver, as much supreme comfort as possible. This project in North Arlington is basically a future-ready house, and so the client was driven to collect solar energy and store it, because she wanted to be basically islandable, or be ready when the electric grid is ready to support our buildings. So the big takeaways from this is lots and lots of wire, lots of wire and special inverters, basically a bidirectional AC-DC inverter, which basically lets you collect and keep your DC electric locally and use that and not be grid tied. The infrastructure is not ready for it. So this house, as I said, is future ready, is able to do that, but it's not able to feed, say, DC current to neighbors or to the neighborhood. Stepping back a bit from in the affordability kind of in the classification of cost, we really want to pay attention to that affordability problem that we have. Passive house as we know, is not always equal to code construction cost-wise. So we really need to dial down the complexity of these buildings as far as envelopes. We need to standardize them. So modular construction is really a great way to do it affordably, we found. And, you know, economies of scale. So multiplication of the same design. Now, this is a project we have in Prince George's County in Maryland that is 6 houses, affordable houses for 3-bedroom houses, which will be future ready by the use of a DC microgrid. In concept, it's the same as the single family house, DC ready house. It's to have inverters local, to collect and to be able to store local. So this in concept, as I said, the grid, the infrastructure is not ready, but we can be as ready as possible for it. So it's basically just moving those inverters out of the houses and into kind of the neighborhood, have these home power plants that share between a central power plant and the individual houses. Now, to kind of like look to the future, 6 houses is still a drop in the bucket. So we really need to pay attention to, again, jumping the scale and looking at more dense, development, larger buildings, and really using the same technology. I return back to my roots and my values about this. I really think that we need to pay attention as architects to affordability and to equity. And I think the technology is there. I think as long as we're taking the helm as architects in these projects, we have hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Next up is Chris Benedict. She's providing a video today. My introduction is, Chris is a curious person with a passion for solving problems in creative ways. In 1995, she started delving into the multifaceted 4-dimensional solutions for substantial gut rehabs. By 98, she was adding exterior air barriers and insulation to urban mid-scale housing projects. Passive House found her. And since then, she has been building both new construction and gut renos in the all-important affordable housing sector in Chicago. Knickerbocker Commons in New York City was her first Passive House project and one of her favorites. Personally, I love the shadow sculpting of the exterior facade of this reborn building. Sometimes Chris even renovates with tenants in place. I can't imagine adding that to the logistic nightmare. Chris is a self-admitted workaholic and is probably noodling pH details in her spare time. Chris admits that the pause of 2020 has given her a much-needed slowdown, and that she wishes she could self-impose on this on her life, but so far, she's too busy to find time. Please welcome Chris Benedict. Thank you.
Hello, Passive House friends. I'm here at 116 Grove Street in Brooklyn, and I'm going to show you the Casa Passiva project. This is a project to make existing buildings Passive House compliant with tenants in place. So we're up on the roof, and these are 4 buildings that happen to be in a row, and they're part of a 9 building project. And a lot of the work is happening up on the roof, and we're calling it our home base. So lots of details here, and we're going to walk through the roof and look at a bunch of the things that are going on here and talk about how they all come together. This view captures the basics of what we're doing here. We're mounting ductless split condenser units on the parapet walls. Here you can see a detail of that connection. Walking past the ductless split condensers, we come to a place where we will be mounting an energy recovery ventilator on top of this stand. And you can see the ductwork that is leading into the, and then insulated on the other side, outside of the. The connection of the refrigerant lines from the outdoor unit to the indoor heads has a very strict protocol attached to it that we inspect. And the first thing is brazing the refrigerant lines while running nitrogen through the refrigerant line. The second test for the refrigerant lines is to perform a pressurization test that will hold for 24 hours. And then after that test is passed, there's a triple evacuation to get moisture out of the lines. And then finally, the amount of refrigerant is calculated, and if there is not enough refrigerant in the charge that came with the unit, there's additional refrigerant added, which is weighed out and monitored. This leaves our ductless split units with their optimal ability to perform. In this view, you can see the ducts that have come out of the ERV up on the roof and are now coming through the parapet and waterfalling down the side of the building, with ports stopping at each of the apartments on the way down to provide either supply or return air. Here you can see refrigerant lines that are coming through the parapets, and these lines are going to connect to the back side of the condensers, or the side of the condenser. And over here we see refrigerant lines going down that will connect to the interior. Even though our parapet walls look a little crude, they get some special details, like this piece of metal flashing. This piece of metal flashing will be the end point for the ephes that's coming over the top of the parapet wall. So this piece of flashing terminates the ephes above, but at the same time allows for the roofing coming up to be removed sometime in the future when it needs to be replaced. A piece of foam will be installed behind this metal flashing with a metal apron holding it in place. Finally, all of the ducts that are leaving the roof from the ERVs are getting sealed into the roofing, and any ducts that come out on the roof side will get sealed into the roofing as well. So all the ducts are in the waterproof. In places where we have an existing roof fan that already is there, we will use its ductwork, remove this fan, but place an ERV in this roof fan's position, clean the ducts, and seal them with AeroSeal. If you'd like to see more of the parapets open, we have a video up from the NESI conference at nesi.org. And if you would like to reach me, I'm Chris at benedictra.com.
Thank you, Chris. That was a very nice video. Now I get to introduce myself, which is very strange. So I started Stone's Throw Design because my passions in architecture, landscape, and ecology really didn't fit into the established firms in Toronto over 21 years ago. Oh, I should share my screen now. I'm telling everybody else what to do, and I have forgotten what I'm supposed to do. Here we go. Sorry about that. And then from the beginning. Okay. I've been running headfirst from one really cool project to another, not once wondering too hard about the consequences of my actions. Luckily, I've been blessed with clients almost as out there as I am, willing to try anything once. When I'm not sitting in my head saving the world, I hop on my electric Zero motorcycle and ride through the Ontario back roads. In the damn, I wish I designed that category. There are too many to mention, but I will bring your attention to a small project at Bedford Glen Housing Project built around a ravine in Midtown Toronto. It has aged beautifully since its construction sometime in the mid to late 70s. Sadly, I've forgotten the architect's name. As moderator, I have taken a few liberties with my presentation. I put a few less slides about me to make room for an update on passive house in Canada. The other 5 panelists were given a portion of the United States, but Katrin gave me all of Canada. Kat, do you realize how big Canada is? So if I'm in my house in Toronto, I can't drive through Ontario in one day. And no, I don't know Mike from Canmore by his in first name basis. So I recruited the board members of Passive Buildings Canada to give a quick geography lesson and tour of Canada using Passive House.
Terrell, sorry to interrupt, your screen isn't showing.
My screen isn't showing, it's showing to me. Your screen is paused. Okay, new share. Let's try that again. See, that's what happens. PowerPoint, share. Is it sharing now?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Excellent. Okay, now I can start. All right, sorry about that. I'm trying to do this well. So, late nights using the light from the hallway to read magazines on nature and conservation. Eventually, this went from Ranger Rick to National Geographic, and then Fine Home Building. Our passions start early, and they are the seeds of our future. Not one class in energy efficiency or environmental design was offered. Design, yes, but the education is light on construction and constructability. If your building is a metaphor for a kimono, that was architecture. I was told many times to reconsider my career. Let's just say I'm stubborn. At the beginning, I read everything I could get my hands on about construction, R2000, Joe Sturbick, and the perfect wall. This is my first home, 5 different renovations, 5 types of insulation, many, many building experiments. Oh, they did give me I forgot the slide was still in there. Sorry, let's skip ahead. My first straw bale home. A former classmate asked me to prepare working drawings for a cottage that she had designed. This was the first straw bale house in Muskoka. The township blew a gasket over the straw bale. They only agreed if Martin Liefheber, a licensed architect with straw bale experience, signed off on the drawings. Luckily he did. Lots of lessons were learned. This here is called building blocks. It was a prefab home with 10 out of 26 modules that you could choose to allow for a 2-bedroom to a 7-bedroom home. It was combined that it could make a single family home, a semi-detached, a townhouse, or a stacked townhouse. In the center, sort of here, if you can see my screen, there's a communal engineered wetland that deals with all the gray and black water on the site. And then I found Passive House. Equipped with fresh Phius experience, training, and sheer enthusiasm, we gutted this house down to the structural masonry, built up new insulated walls, set them off 2 inches from the exterior for a continuous barrier. Sadly, the air tightness was only 1.5 air changes per hour, but it was my first attempt, and I had to use 80% existing windows. This house uses about 75% less energy than it did before. And then someone asked me, would you design with dirt? Sure, that's my answer. 6 inches of rammed earth, 6 inches of polyiso insulation, and another 6 inches of rammed earth. The devil is in the details. We have a SIPS panel roof on this one, an XPS under the slab, and the total site energy is well under the 120 kilowatt hours per meter square per annum. Straw bale take 2. Permit is flat out denied without any explanations. So I changed the name of straw bale to cellulose and got a permit. Created a huge alternative compliance package on straw bale and made it public. Resubmitted, got the permit just before the straw arrived. Ooh, the picture didn't show up. Ooh, that's too bad. No, sorry about that. So Chris Magwood, there was a picture here. It was great. It was a graph. This blew my mind. I don't know if you've heard his work on the elephant in the room. He's very much into embodied carbon. The basis of the graph said that a foam passive house has more embodied carbon than a code compliant house. So if you build a natural passive house, you can sequester carbon from day one. And now we get into what I'm sort of into these days, prefabulous construction. So I've worked with Eric Cura Design to come up with a lower cost design. And this is it. This is the FAIA. It's been built 5 times in Ontario, and it is passive house certifiable. I'm also working with Indigenous cultures and with smaller projects in which we're using prefabricated CLT construction that comes to the site in flat packed like a gingerbread house to create. On the left, it's showing the walls as they would be sent to the manufacturer with the holes in it. And on the right shows a little cabin. It's about 400 square feet, and it actually has 3 bedrooms in it. There's another pre-design that I do, and where we work with Aiken frame homes. We take attic trusses, put them on helical piles to create the house. This one is a 1-story home, but many of them are designed so that as the family grows, the attic truss is raised and the first floor is built afterwards. This is done with cellulose insulation and zip panels, sorry. Oh, hopefully my pictures are going to show up. This is not good. I don't know what's happening. Okay, cross-country checkup. I had a map of Canada on there. I tested these earlier. This is very interesting. So this is where, this is so strange. This is where I was going to talk about Canada. I'm feeling very bad now. Nova Scotia, I'm going to get a report from Laurie Rand at Habit Studio in Nova Scotia. So it's at the far east side of Canada. Nova Scotia has loads of single family homes, largely due to the work of passive design solutions. Everyone knows Natalie Leonard. Her team is working on over 100 projects locally and in North America. Currently, Laurie Rand herself has 6 passive house projects on the go. And she's also working on a passive house museum in Cape Breton that is about to go to tender. I have no idea what this is not working. Okay. Quebec, that's in the middle, somewhere to the east of Ontario. Will Murray of Rocket Construction. There are a couple of Phius projects on the go in the eastern townships, and there is interest in certification, but with the very low cost of hydro in that province and the added cost of certification, the projects typically get pulled back to become really great houses, less the PV and the energy credits. Ontario, which is my province, next over. Before COVID, Passive Buildings Canada was producing 6 to 8 boots on the ground events every year. These are live speaking engagements with 3 speakers, an engineer, an architect, and and a designer to talk about how they build their projects. We also have a mini trade show at each of these events. We tape these and they're on our YouTube channel. Many large and small projects are on their way in Ontario, but it's certainly not mainstream. Personally, COVID has doubled my workload, but certification seems less important without government incentives. Next we pass over into the prairies, and we have Alberta and BC, Kim Walton of Bow Crow Design, and the president now of Passive Buildings Canada. She's working on several passive house projects. Normally, passive house projects are about 30% of her work, but it's now 90%. She's doing, she's a consultant on the facilities management office for a building at the University of British Columbia. And she has upwards of 6 projects on her boards right now for the next few years. In BC, nearly 800 University of Victoria students will be able to make themselves at home on a new campus housing by 2022. The City of Vancouver, they're the luckiest of all. They promote Passive House Standard with incentives for certification. And Passive House Canada is the main driving force in that province. This is where my mind is wandering these days. I'm thinking about ecosystem regeneration, planting trees, planting water on the site. The books that I'm reading right now is Brad Lancaster's book on water management on site. Waste management, nothing leaves the site, so that if you have a material on the building, that it becomes something else and doesn't actually go to waste. And then a concept about nature and not nature. Where's the line where humans don't get to have an effect on the landscape? And that is all despite all of the things that went wrong. Thank you very much. And now I get to continue talking and go on to the next person, and hopefully I will find their talk. So here we go. I believe James is next. Hopefully I won't make any more mistakes. And I'm going to unshare my screen so that he may share his. James and his wife run River Architects in Cold Spring, New York. Surrounded by state parks and close to New York City, their focus is passive house residential, both new and retrofits. They are moving towards larger multi-unit residential and commercial projects as well, such as his favorite project, the Seminary Hill Cidery and event space. James' thoughts these days are looking for ways to bring costs down while still being able to make beautiful buildings. He says that when users love their buildings, it spurs longevity. In the damn, I wish I had designed that category, James loves the Brutalist Pirelli building by Marcel Breuer so much, he made postcards with design ideas for retrofitting the building. Unfortunately, someone else benefited from his propaganda, but he is very happy it will become a future passive house hotel. Well, James, if you don't get to design it, perhaps you can sleep there. When not working, you might find James practicing the bagpipes. True story. Luckily, he lives in a very small community, too spread out for noise complaints. COVID's effect on his community has been large. Only 1 hour from New York City, the quarantine masses have been overrunning the area just to get fresh air and time out of their apartments. This has forced the local community to make bigger responses to the pandemic. Anyway, a great welcome to James, Hartford. Thank you. You have to unmute yourself, James.
How is that?
That is much better.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that intro. And I'm going to send everyone here today a postcard of my propaganda on the Pirelli building. Thanks for having me here today. My firm is River Architects, and I'm just about to get this. 1 second, what's going on here? Okay, let me get this rolling here. Okay, so this is just queued up here. It's not really my start, but River Architects are based in Cold Spring, New York, and it's a small firm that my wife and I started. Picture coming up. Whoa. I love technical difficulties. 1 second, please. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's the team. We've got a small firm of 5 people currently, plus some staff to help us get through our day. We have a very large number of passive house consultants, both in our daily office as well as people who've used to work for us and moved on. Judy and I started our firm, our practice in New York City in the late 90s. And, you know, in New York, most things are built there. So you spend a lot of time renovating and refurbishing things. And you learn great software like Therm and how to avoid thermal bridges if you're in the right kind of firm. So G and I moved out of New York City. Here you can see Battery Park City where we were living, and we were just in the shadow of the World Trade Center. And moved up to Cold Spring in the Hudson Highlands. We're only an hour and 10 minutes north by train, and it's a 1 square mile community with 2,000 people. It's a great place to be. A lot of restoration, but once in a while we get to do new construction. And so this is our first low energy building, which was designed with SIPs, and we had a pretty decent air tightness, but I'm not going to say what it was. Triple pane windows, Daikin ERV, our heat pump system, but we're starting to get to passive house. And once we took the training, I made the pitch to a client who said, why would I do it any other way? This is a retrofit of an existing structure, and it's within the floodplain actually of the Hudson River. So the first floor is designed to actually handle flooding. Great views out to the west towards the mountains, and once in a while an architect has to act as model as well and brings his child in for the photographer's shoot. So all the views are actually to the west and the north, and we actually only have 1 small window in the south. But glare is controlled by the mountains actually opposite. We had a loved Victorian house burned down, and we replaced it actually with a modular passive house, trying different ways. We essentially did a retrofit on this once the 6 boxes were set, and then brought it up. So then we got into doing pre-design offerings, and our first client actually supersized our pre-design offerings that were meant to be much smaller. But we got to test the concept. And so this is in the Catskills. We built that with R.L. Baxter, a local passive house firm, and also used Benson wood for our panels and flat packed it. And Tesla Powerwall system, so we're fossil fuel free and get to flatten out our energy use throughout the day. So, and into the night. Here's a house that's a bit more traditional looking with, it's on a mountaintop here in Garrison, and it has views all the way down to New York City. It's got ICFs and Larson Trust construction, and also solar. It's source net zero. The interior is more classic. Back to Terrell's point, we want to make our buildings loved so that people don't change them much. So hopefully they have greater longevity that way. And rich materials, but honest materials that would wear well and over time. We had a parallel business kind of in works, developing breweries. And so we've done new construction, LEED gold structures, as well as interior fit outs of historic buildings. And it's a lot of fun because these are, kind of really getting back to bars and restaurants that a lot of architects cut their teeth on. And we got to actually bring both halves of our brain together, doing both a passive house cidery and new construction, and taking a modern take on the old bank barn approach, which is emblematic of the Catskills. So this project looks out over the Delaware River Valley, and across the orchards. We have one temperate zone downstairs in the production space, and then the event space itself is conditioned for human comfort with reclaimed larch from a bridge project actually across the Hudson River. And then our own studio, which is an 1840s circa barn, which was for shoeing horses. So this, we're source net zero, have 10 computers and dual monitors, and it's home to our studio and often to our kids, especially during the pandemic. This retrofit was quite a heavy lift. Literally, we moved the frame off the foundations, rebuilt the foundations, and put the frame back on, and did an exterior kind of tightening. You can see the cribbing being pulled out there underneath our project sign. We had extremely tight air tightness, 0.2 air changes per hour. But then we got to expose the interior timber and really enjoy the history from the inside. And it is often our kind of our training spot, but also our partying spot. Here we are with a three-generation building crew, the Hootenanny builders. Our firm also participated in the Energy Sprung Retrofit New York pilot program. And we got to work on the Troy Housing Authority conceptually, bringing the EUI down from 81 of the original buildings to below around 16. And then we also participated in the NYSERDA Buildings of Excellence first program and won $1 million for our clients for this project, a 53 new dwelling unit over commercial space. Obviously very interested in reducing local impact. And I'm the founder of the Passive House Alliance Hudson Valley, which is the largest passive chapter in the Northeast, FAIA chapter in the Northeast. Very busy in advocacy and working very closely with NYSERDA, bringing Phius training to the Hudson Valley and connecting professionals. And that's my time. Thanks.
All right, had to unmute myself there. Okay, thank you very much, James. That was great. At least your slide showed. I'm feeling very bad. All right, so we're going to move on to Catherine Baker of London Bone Baker Architects. Catherine, can you show your screen now so nobody has to look at me? Catherine is of many minds with a master's in social science, a degree in architecture, and a passive house expert. She has combined her passions into creating livable, low-energy, multi-unit residential buildings. She's passionate about how different cultures and different individuals affect the buildings they live in, how the users personalize construction over time and overlapping in time. Her favorite project is the Dorchester Art and Housing Collaboration Project. They took an abandoned building and turned it into an artist housing with a community art space. Programming is available constantly for the immediate neighborhood, and the building has become well loved by the community. In the damn, she wishes she had designed that category, Notre Dame du Haute Chapelle by Le Corbusier at Ronchamp is her favorite. Catherine is a self-described introvert, but even 2020's social restrictions are weighing her down. She is looking forward to more human contact in the future. These Zoom meetings are exhausting. Here's a good welcome for Catherine Baker. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrell. I'll talk a little bit about Tierra Linda. So Tierra Linda is an affordable housing project that contains the first multifamily passive house residence constructed in Chicago, Illinois. And that's kind of important because Chicago has an issue with fire, so our building code's a little bit complicated. It was developed by the Community Development Corporation, LUCHA, also known as Latin United Community Housing Association. So I am Catherine Baker, and I'm an architect who works at London Bone Baker Architects. We design affordable housing, mainly in Chicago, and I'm going to tell you a little bit, about 6.5 minutes worth, about passive house at Tierra Linda and why we believe it's important. Some background on the project. Tierra Linda was originally conceived of as an affordable housing project, providing 45 affordable family apartments in the Humboldt Park and Logan Square neighborhoods in Chicago. Affordable housing is critical in these neighborhoods. In Humboldt Park, approximately 65% of the rental population is cost burdened, meaning 65% of residents pay over 30% of their income or rent. The Logan Square neighborhood has also been identified as having a lack of parks and green space. In fact, it had the least amount of green space per capita in the city of Chicago. In 2015, a plan by the city to transform an abandoned elevated rail line called the 606 into a 2.7 mile pedestrian trail was realized. The new trail brought much needed, yep.
Your slides are not advancing.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let's see. Do you know where I left off?
It was the big screen from the beginning, the same one.
Oh dear, okay.
Just start over, do it again.
All right, let's see, maybe it'll load. Okay. Okay, so Tierra Linden is an affordable housing project that contains the first multifamily passive house residence constructed in Chicago, Illinois. It was developed by the Community Development Corporation, LUCHA, Latin United Community Housing Association, in 2018. Are we seeing, so let's see if they advance before I continue on. Are you seeing the slide?
It's still the first picture that we saw initially.
Okay. I'll just have to advance. Okay, sorry, we're just going to do it low key here.
Fine.
So my name is Catherine Baker, and I'm an architect who works at Land & Bone Baker Architects. We design affordable housing, mainly in Chicago, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, about 6.5 minutes worth, maybe a little bit more now, about Passive House at Tierra Linda and why we believe it's important. Some background on the project. Tierra Linda was originally conceived of as an affordable housing project, providing 45 affordable family apartments in the Humboldt Park and Logan Square neighborhoods in Chicago. Affordable housing is critical in these neighborhoods. In Humboldt Park, approximately 65% of the rental population is cost burdened, meaning 65% of residents pay over 30% of their income on rent. Logan Square neighborhood has also been identified as having a lack of parks and green space. In fact, it had the least amount of green space per capita in the city of Chicago. In 2015, a plan by the city to transform an abandoned elevated rail line called the 606 into a 2.7 mile pedestrian trail was realized. The new trail brought much needed green space to the neighborhood, but it also spurred real estate speculation and gentrification which threatens affordable housing. A lack of decent affordable housing compounded with a lack of green spaces in these neighborhoods have been prime contributing factors to health issues such as asthma, diabetes, and obesity. Many residents forego medical care, surgery, treatment, prescriptions, and even eyeglasses due to cost. As the project was forming, Lucha understood that providing affordable housing wasn't going to be enough. The housing needed to address overall quality of life issues for the residents. And to be successful, it needed to address these issues through a collaborative process driven by community needs and input. Lucha believed that the residents deserved the most sustainable housing possible and wanted to pursue passive house design. Being the first multifamily passive house project was important, but just as important was the process taken to achieve this milestone and the implications of this development on future affordable housing projects. LBBA and Lucha developed and hosted workshops, neighborhood tours, and eco-charrettes with building management, tenants, neighbors, and maintenance staff. Based on the input from the workshops, the strategies and vision for the project were formed, reinforcing and supporting the core theme of healthy living and wellness. The engagement process also resulted in the design of vibrant buildings that serve as a visual reminder that Latinx families are part of the history and the future of the Chicago neighborhood. Residents helped to select the finishes and colors of the buildings. As a way to further address healthy living initiatives, Lucha asked LBBA to engage its LBBA Labs program to research and promote bike use with its residents. During a 6 weeks paid high school internship program, Chicago high school students interviewed Lucha residents about their bike use. They researched the neighborhood, visited bike shops, toured buildings with bike center design, and ultimately created an overall plan for integrating bike use into the Lucha buildings. With feedback from the workshops and additional research, Lucha believed that building a passive house was critical to advancing equity issues in affordable housing. At that point, Lucha committed to building a passive house. Getting to passive house wasn't easy though. Lucha sought additional funds. In this case, the passive house cost an additional $41,000 per unit than the other 6 flat. We had a lot of teamwork. Phius graciously provided energy models and feasibility studies. Our team and Lynn Mathis, the contractor, researched various wall configuration to meet building codes energy modeling requirements, construction sequencing, and all with respect to cost issues. Building a multifamily passive house also required code modifications. The team needed to seek administrative relief for non-conforming building code items, such as the flywheel ERV and approval for reduced mechanical ventilation. The project received its first residents in the fall of 2018. One of the very first residents, in fact, had been displaced earlier by Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and she was now experiencing the brutal polar vortex of early 2019. But this time around, her housing was designed to address climate extremes. So what are we doing now? What have we learned? We are currently gathering data. In addition to the Passive House 6 flat, the development also includes a sister building designed to comply with code minimum Energy Star requirements. These two buildings will allow our partner, Slipstream, to compare energy usage between the two. Slipstream will be analyzing energy performance, construction operating cost, and indoor air quality. In August, Slipstream provided us with some preliminary data. Some key interim takeaways included expected results. The Phius property's air leakage is about 1/3 of the Energy Star property, and the seasonal heating requirement for the Phius property was half of the Energy Star property. But we also learned that data vary greatly between the individual units based on occupancy and behavior. Slipstream's yearly report is coming out soon. Stay tuned. The final report comes out on November 7th. We expect to have more data on cooling loads and a cost analysis. And then there are additional issues that have yet to be identified and will be explored further. So we hope that the success of Tierra Linda opens the door for other affordable housing and also for-profit developers to incorporate passive house standards. We look forward to sharing our lessons with others to promote sustainable and healthy living environments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Appreciate that. Next up is Andrew Steingiser. I'll have him share his screen while I introduce him. Andrew has been putting his architect brain to work ensuring university students get firsthand experience living in passive house comfort. He is proud of the 2 Phius certified dormitories at Williams and Wheaton College. He worked both on the design and on the site construction admin. Andrew's passions turned him on to passive house, taking the training on his own initiative. Keeping up with the passive house community at conferences and in local chapters is important to him. Finally, someone else to talk to. Currently, he is reading Being Ecological by Timothy Morton, any book that mixes references to Blade Runner, Tibetan Buddhism, and the lyrics of the Talking Heads. I might have to get that. This might also explain Andrew's choice for, damn, I wish I designed that, The Foundling Hospital in Florence by Brunelleschi. This is a man of very diverse thinking. When he is not working, his focus is on his 2 young children. I am certain they will get fantastic answers to the question of why. Please welcome Andrew Steingiser. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Thank you for that intro. Okay, is that working? As you can see, I'm very friendly. So thank you for that intro. I'm Andrew Steingiser, project architect and CPHC at SGA in Boston. I advocate for sustainable practice across the firm. A little bit about SGA. We have offices in Boston and New York. And we've designed the first 2 Phius certified res halls in Massachusetts at Williams College and Wheaton College. We're not afraid to take on non-conventional projects and delivery methods. This image is from the Energy Sprung Deep Energy Retrofit prototype proposal we worked on in collaboration with Ashley McGraw at Syracuse for SUNY Oneonta. And our higher ed group here has really developed a particular expertise in both low energy use buildings and res halls at universities. As I was saying, our passive building activity has really been championed by our higher ed group here at SGA. And residential halls are a good fit for passive house. Academic institutions see the benefit of the long-term payback through the energy savings and cost savings. And increasingly, students expect to live in sustainable environments. My personal journey began out of school with working on large commercial buildings, corn shell, multifamily, and renovations on existing buildings like this one. There was a high level of design involved, but the projects weren't particularly energy focused and often involved a lot of glass, although very nicely designed glass. Through these projects, I gained exposure to construction types used in large commercial buildings. Around that time, I started seeing these images on Art Daily and other places of these really interesting buildings in Europe that were well designed and also didn't use much energy. And I started to say, wow, buildings can do that. And additionally, I became aware of more local examples in our Boston design community of some really great work happening. My personal journey continued with these Habitat for Humanity projects. They were the first projects of my own which allowed me to experiment. These were the most efficient buildings that this chapter had built to date. They're using HERS scores. I think they're down in the low 30s. In 2013, I took the Phius training and recognized that we have the roadmap to high performance buildings. The second one on the right actually had all the components of a passive house. Zender was kind enough to donate ERVs for the project, slightly less R value per habitat standards. My evolution continued as a practicing architect. I continued to try to be responsible as possible with my work. This lab office building in Baltimore had a 40% window wall ratio and better detailing informed by my passive house training, including the beginnings of a window surround detail here that provided shading as well. So I continued to try to be as responsible as possible with my work. And at SGA here, when I joined SGA, we had our res hall at Williams College underway. This is the first passive house building in our office. And I worked on the detailing and in-house passive house consulting. And it shows how a passive house building can take the form of a wood frame vernacular New England residential building. So you can see here, this building has a suite style layout with 6-person suites centered around community space, a lounge, study space, and communal kitchen in the lower level. It also highlights some of the inefficiencies of a less dense floor plan. SGA recently won an IIDA New England Interior Design Award for this project. And it's important to show that a high level of design can be achieved in passive house buildings. Initially with clients, there's often a misconception about some of the design restrictions that a passive house building might impose. Here we see all the elements of the passive house building, a high performance envelope, high performance glazing, having the Alpen windows in this building. Thermal bridge free design, and this building was certified using the PV as well. So we use a 2x6 stud wall construction with cellulose with 3 inches of polyiso outboard, a cost-effective and simple wall with hardy siding on battens, and a SIPS roof provided a simple underlayment for a vented metal roof. And this was a little bit unique in the office where we were doing a wood frame building, which typically we don't do, and developing details that were outside of the thermal envelope for all those projections and things like that. So our residential hall, Pine Hall here at Wheaton College, is the first FAIA certified res hall in Massachusetts. This one was certified prior to Williams. And it's more contemporary horizontal building in the context of 3 existing mid-century res halls on the lower campus at Wheaton College. And it utilizes systems that are common to large-scale construction, both building systems and mechanical systems. This building is sited at the edge of campus and forms a new face on Pine Street, just up here to the plan north up in the left-hand corner. It completes the 4th side of a quad at the lower campus and provides an amenity space in the lower left there for the 3 adjacent buildings, as well as the residents of this building. The typical upper level demonstrates the efficiency and cost and performance through density. The ganged bathrooms also provided an ideal configuration for a drain water heat recovery system. And you see it's a mix of singles and doubles on a double loaded corridor. It also demonstrates how a lower carbon footprint per capita is achievable with a greater density of occupants. Again, all the components of the passive house in place here, a centralized suite and ERV system, 1 per wing, centralized heating and cooling system delivered to each space through a passive valence unit, and our high performance envelope consisting of brick walls, triple glazed curtain wall, and high performance windows. So this was a steel and precast plank building, type 2 construction. It uses standard 6-inch cold form metal framing for the walls. And we maxed out the 5 inches of mineral wool outboard of the sheathing that we could use before getting to custom brick ties, compensated for the rest of the remaining R value required in the cavity. Initially designed with cellulose, ended up being closed cell spray foam per the builder's preference. Just belt suspenders on the airtightness in their view. And we tried to really incorporate the performance into the architecture here with the self-shading window surrounds, the depth of which was coordinated with the size of the window in an attempt to reduce the cooling demand. So future projects on the boards, this building for university in Boston here is sort of the next step in the evolution of our res halls. It's high rise in Boston and incorporates passive house design principles, currently looking at a 30% window to wall ratio. And we're taking the lessons learned from our passive house res halls and applying them here and building on those successes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I want to thank all the speakers for the work put into this and their effort today. It's fast-paced, and I hope that everybody here today has some questions for our panelists. Before we get to the question section, I'm going to pass it on eventually to Lily to describe how that works in the question and answer period. But I want to add a little bit of interactivity to the Hootenanny today. So Lily's going to open up the chat, and what you have to do is, without thinking about it, really quickly answer in the category of damn, I wish I had designed that, your favorite building in the world. So we'll get a list. You can look at it now, maybe we'll print it out later or post it somewhere, just to see what everyone's thinking about. Anyway, with that, I am going to pass this on to Lily, and she's going to talk to you about the question period.
Yes, so once we start the question period, how we're going to do it is we are going to have everyone, if you'd like to share, we would love to see your faces. If not, we'll hear your voices. But we're going to do it in an orderly fashion. And if you click the, if you're interested in speaking and you can click on the participants button and see the list. And at the bottom, you'll see that there's a variety of buttons that say yes, no, slow down, go faster. If you'd like to speak, just click I'll know if it's any of the buttons, but ideally the yes button, and you'll get queued, and then we'll go through and I'll unmute you and let you know when I'm doing that, so you can ask your question as we go through.
Okay, great. Nobody needs to see me anymore. I think it's time for the promotional video, Lily. Practice makes perfect. I am noticing everyone putting things in the chat line. That's pretty amazing. Very excited to see some of these buildings. Video doesn't seem to be running. Lily, let me know if you want to put it at the end, and then we can go to the questions in between.
Oh, did it cut out? Did it not work?
It did not work, yeah.
Okay, we can try it at the end then.
Perfect. Let's get to the questions, and I'm gonna mute myself. Well, unless I'm asked a question, and we'll see how it goes. I love technical glitches.
Okay, so yes. So if anybody has a question, just use the yes button to signal that you'd like to be unmuted.
Peter, I can't talk.
Okay, we have one. Juanita, you can unmute and share your video.
Doesn't unmute.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I don't have a video, I have a question.
Okay,
I noticed that several people have benefited from incentives or programs that are developed by municipalities. Is there any general process by which those came to be that Passive House was able to take advantage of? So how do you get a city like Milwaukee or Minneapolis to offer incentives for building high-performing houses or buildings? Did you hear that?
Yes, I think we heard the question. I'm going to just sort of jump in and not answer it because I can't answer that question, but I'm hoping one of the panelists will jump in and save me from this, just to keep the thing going so we don't have a lot of dead air. The only thing I know about specifically about Vancouver having that is that it was a process of the local associations really working at the city level to get these kind of incentives as part of the building code. We've done a little bit in Ontario, but it hasn't gone anywhere near as far. It's a very slow process. So I'm going to leave this to my American counterparts, and they can talk to you.
I can speak to that. Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
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 Okay,
Yes.
great. It's really unfortunate, you know, the private sector is behind the game, right? The projects that are getting incentivized these days are tax credit, you know, for nonprofit developers. You know, it's a great thing, the low income housing tax credit program right now. You know, it's bringing affordable housing at scale and speed to our communities. But that's a state by state program, and some states are behind the 8 ball with adopting those. It's really unfortunately, from my perspective, is you have to show them first what high performance does for the quality of living, and then educate you know, policymakers locally to pull those incentives into written code.
So
If I may pipe in, Juanita, are you an architect?
no, I'm not. I'm a passive house raider, but I'm very interested in trying to encourage local whoever to get involved in building better buildings. So they incentivize low cost housing, but they don't come anywhere near even doing Energy Star version 3. And so it's kind of an interesting problem or conundrum. Where do you start? Do you start at your alderman, mayor? It's one of those things that I don't understand. How this gets done.
I'll tell you, if you can set an architect on fire where you are, there's a lot of incentive for an architect to do a passive house. It's the newest, greatest thing that you can do as an architect. So that's number one. And number two, architects can study what the status quo is, what the business as usual is, and they can start to actually create buildings that are built for the same construction cost with the new designs. And once that's happened, they set themselves apart and they get more business. And so I think there's a huge incentive on the architect's part. I know that is what has worked for me in New York City. I started making buildings that were way more efficient for the same cost as typical construction by understanding what was typically done and what we could do if we made changes. So I don't think we need to look towards these subsidies and incentives. I think we need to look more towards our profession to be able to bring this forward.
Well, there's a lot of architects who are interested, but they have no clients. And the city is interested in low-cost housing, but there's no way to bring those two entities together.
I wouldn't be so negative about it. You know, every job that an architect has, they can make it the best that they can. And the ones that don't have work can get the work.
Hey, this is Kat. Maybe Andrew, you can speak to that, because the Boston market has taken off, and a lot of that takeoff is due to some pretty aggressive incentive work on the Mass Save front and the Department of Energy there.
Yeah, sure. We're fortunate in Massachusetts to have a lot of these programs in place, a lot of it through the Mass Save program, it's called, which are really in place because of the utilities here. Lately, there are incentives to subsidize the cost of feasibility studies for passive house building for multifamily projects. Unfortunately, not technically for res halls or other types of commercial buildings yet. I'm told they're working on some of that, but also with the Mass Save program, there are opportunities for subsidized charrettes, energy charrettes to kick off beginning of projects, and study energy conservation measures, including some initial energy modeling that can be done at the outset. So, I mean, fortunately, we have some of these things in place. Also in Massachusetts, in our energy code now, as an alternate compliance path, Phius and PHI are written in as well. So I think there's some recognition here. Now, how the question about how to encourage entities to put that in place, I'm not so sure, but I don't know, maybe others could chime in on that.
May I actually jump in on that, Andrew?
Yeah.
And Kat? I actually am working for Mass Save and helping to manage the Passive House Incentive Program for Massachusetts. So thank you, Kat, for bringing that up. Yes, this is kind of driven by the utilities, but in part that is driven by organizations like Passive House Massachusetts that lobbied to our kind of governing body, the EEAC, and to our the Boston zoning boards and building commissions, and basically pushed for Passive House as an option and as a direction, and low energy buildings with Passive House as a pathway to achieve that. Currently, there's a huge push for zero energy buildings. And again, groups like Passive House Massachusetts and MCAN and others are recognizing and pointing out that Passive House is an ideal system of a pathway to achieve that zero energy goal. So a lot of that is ground swell from excited individuals, just communicating well and going out there and making the point to zoning boards and organizing bodies. So.
And I'd just like to add, there's a new Wisconsin chapter, so contact the Phius office, and Jenny, a new stakeholder coordinator, she'll put you in contact if you're not already.
Well, I'm on the board of that group, but you've now given me a project for the group.
We have the recipe, we can tell you, yes.
Okay, great.
Perfect. All right. So it looks like Chris Weisflog, you have a question? You're welcome to share it if you still have one.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear? Yeah, right, great. So my question was for Andrew. I thought I'd seen on one of your slides there, did you say phase change materials in one of your projects? Was it PCMs?
Yes, in the Williams project, we used phase changing materials. We placed them, so that building has no active cooling in it, just to maintain standards, equity standards across the housing stock on that campus with other buildings that didn't have it. So we try to utilize, operable windows and passive ventilation in whether that permits it, and also put phase changing materials into the building. They're, for those who aren't familiar with them, they're basically like a sheet of little ketchup packets that are full of clay and salt effectively that change phases from solid to liquid as they absorb heat and then eventually release it. They have a sort of set point. And so these sheets of this product were placed above ceilings and on the interior face, inside the interior partitions of the building. And yes, we left a little portion out in picture hanging height, so someone's not putting a nail through it. And theoretically, they can change the temperature in a building of up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, we're told. Mainly they've been used in warehouses to date, but we employed it here.
So you said theoretically, so does that mean that you haven't done the analysis to see whether they are actually doing the job? And secondly, was just to confirm, they were being used to optimize the cooling aspect of climate control, not the heating side, right? And so following on it, whether you did any analysis, did you go any further and see whether they were cost effective as well as effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as far as being able to monitor the performance of that particular material, we don't have a good system in place to test that, unfortunately. We have been following some monitoring in the building, and it's performing pretty much as expected. A few hiccups in the ERV functioning as it's supposed to at the moment, but I think it's building systems related, smooth out the kinks in the first year. But unfortunately, we haven't found a way to monitor the performance of that phase changing material itself, as it's just sort of a passive kind of thermal mass almost behind these surfaces in the building. I can say I was there in a very hot day this July with the building unoccupied, with all the windows closed and the ERVs off. And the building was actually still fairly comfortable considering, whereas any other building would have been sweltering. So just intuitively, it seems like our thermal envelope and things like those PCMs are working. I'm sorry, I don't have more conclusive data for that.
That's great, thank you. Inquisition's complete, thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Anybody else have any questions?
Everybody's still answering the favorite building question.
Well, we always have our backup questions.
It looks like, let's see. Okay, Narrow Gate, you have a question?
I do. My name is Bob Wagoner, and I have a question for anybody in the panel for people doing their first passive house. What would be some stumbling blocks that typically happen that you would help us not trip on, be more alert going into it?
First thing that comes to my mind is get on the right page, get on the same page with the builder. I don't know if you're a builder or an architect, but to have, all aspects of project delivery well communicated, to get it, to understand the basics, air sealing basics and details. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
I would say try to understand all your details and try to get them as simple as they possibly can be. And even so with the drawing, if it's difficult to draw, it's going to be difficult to build. So if you can streamline that stuff and make the things that you want to monitor visible, like the air barrier, so that you can see it and it's indisputable whether it has a hole in it or not, those things will take you a long way in the stress of trying to get all the pieces to come together during a construction period.
I found that minimizing penetrations in the wall, asking the contractors for their input on portions of the project so they feel engaged in it, because sometimes they have different experiences than you do, and they might know how to build the same detail better. They might not, but at least you've got a communication going between you and the contractor to figure it out. But if there are less holes to begin with in the building, there are less things to fix afterwards.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in too. Like separating out the functions of the building is really important. Like structure sheathing as air tightness layer, insulation layer, weather resistant barrier, to kind of make it simple and diagrammatic so that exactly everything's inspectable. It's very, very simple. You're not doing crazy origami. And then also get everybody on the job site together at the same time and make sure that your electricians and everybody else are a part of that. You really got to make sure that the guy with the drill going through after all the air sealing is done isn't poking holes and turning into Swiss cheese, because that'll happen.
Yeah, another thing
I would jump in and say,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
So depending on what you're building or where, if it's like a multifamily building, like here in Chicago, unions are a pretty big deal. So I think having the discussion with the contractor about the sequencing, like we actually had to develop 3 or 4 different wall types, because depending on what union was out there, they would have to remove a scaffold and then put up a new scaffold. The next trade would have to put up a new scaffold. So we went with EFIS because it could just be one trade building that. So again, that sequence, and because we don't usually deal with that, or not necessarily, but understanding again, what's the sequence of construction, which trades are on site when, and what is the prep to get them on site.
Yeah, just building on that, I would never change a detail that I've spent a long time on in the field. If there's a suggestion to do something, you should go back and draw it and really make sure that, the 2 or 3 dimensions that you're drawing in can connect well to everything else, because I think that's some of the worst stuff, is when I've agreed to a different way of doing something and then gone back to the office and seen, no, that's not going to work. Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. The subs are all standing around waiting for you to make the decision, and you just have to say, sorry, I'm going back to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Stick to your plan and stick to your guns, right?
Yeah.
I get the sense that it may take a fair amount more time in the field than than what people may be used to before doing passive house. Is that true or not? Just to keep an eye on everything.
I would say so, but I think over time you start to know when you don't have to be there that much. Like during a construction period, you have to be there, at least for me, a lot at the beginning when all of the passive house stuff is going on. But you don't have to be there all the time for finishes and all those other things. So you kind of you have an intensive period where things are going way too fast, and then you're back to what your normal time would be. So it isn't the complete construction period where you're being overtaxed, I would say.
And the first one is a learning curve. It's going to be a knot in the head for a lot of people, but you just suck it up and learn. It's a fun process, and it's a great one.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Okay. Next we have Enrique Bueno.
Thank you, Lily. Yes, basically, you're architects. I'm an engineer, so I chair the Vermont Passive House here in Vermont. And what we have been trying is to get on board the AIA Vermont chapter and the architects in Vermont, but we haven't been successful doing that. Our main core of Passive House members are either builders or engineers, and we haven't been very much successful approaching the architects, despite the fact that one of the major architects here in Vermont built probably the second multifamily building, Passive House certified in climate zone number 6. But that hasn't really bring any enthusiasm among architects, and they still think that the passive house approach is very expensive and will basically chase away their clients. So what's my question is to you architects, what would be the right way to approach them and to see if we can get more architects on board? Because I think the architects are the main gates to to the projects. Most of the projects come through architects. And if they are not on board, then we're missing the boat there.
Well, if I can speak, we find that building community in different communities and just putting it out there as the standard to come to. Our boots on the ground events bring over 100 people when it's not COVID out for an evening event, and then just promoting that and putting that online. And in each of the communities, we have one in Muskoka, which is 2 hours north of Toronto, and there's 100,000 people who live there, and we still get 100 people out. And by inviting them for talks on different subjects and inviting the contractors and inviting the engineers and the architects together, you start to create community and they start to talk to one another, and then that builds and builds and builds. So I can build in Muskoka at Passive House levels as well as in Toronto, because that community has already started and we've only had a few events there. Same thing where, you know, you're doing it in different provinces. I mean, definitely it's happening in the United States. You've got way more people than we do. So, yeah.
Thanks.
I think our community in New York really lit up because number one, it became popular really fast in New York, and everyone wanted to jump on the train. And then people started to see that, you know, it's not that intimidating. It's not that difficult. Yes, you have to be way more careful, but you can get work by doing this. You can do exciting designs. It's not as if, you know, Passive House precludes, you know, fun and excitement and design. And I think, you know, it kind of busted open the, you know, anybody's fears. That seems to be what needs to happen for architects when they start to see that. I think they get excited.
I mean, delivering a message to them and saying, you need to evolve or you're going to be left behind in 5 years, I think is something that they would understand. I mean, that's how this market is here is, you know, the high performance work is going to be out there if it's not already knocking on your door. And so they just will not have those opportunities if they're not knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would also throw out.
Building your community is really vital. It's both for as a support group, but it's also the extension of professionals that you can rely on and pull from. You know, 10 years ago, it was a lot harder to build a passive house than it is now, because there's just so much saturation of knowledge now that's available and much better products and just much more a broader database. But you know, but getting out there, you know, like and engaging with the community is really important. I've talked to the local AIA chapter back in, I don't know, 7 years ago, and hardly anybody showed up. No architects were interested, and the few that knew about it was like, oh, that's that crazy thing where you can't open the windows or it's an icebox or something. And now, like, we do events for AIA, and it's, you know, it's standing room only. It's a much higher interest that people have. So you just have to be patient and just keep on hitting them. But people know it now. Not, you know, 5 years ago you had to explain it.
Yeah, some architects just need to be shown the way. There's a lot of fear factor out there between potential clientele, architects, engineers. A lot of people need to retool, and Matthew made the comment about, you know, staying relevant. You know, moving forward, that's incredibly important. Now, you know, we all need to retool a little bit and stay ahead. But, you know, you as an engineer, I mean, what kind of engineer are you? Are you a mechanical engineer?
Sorry, no, it's a chemical engineer.
Okay.
I'm the fish out of the pond.
Oh, no worries. Well, I mean, you know, again, architects need to be shown the way, particularly the engineers that we work with. Sometimes, how to put this politely, sometimes we're guiding them, sometimes they're leading the way. But if we can just, you know, be shown that it's not that difficult. And in the case of larger scale buildings, it's not that different from the code requirements for a large building anyway. So depending where you are, energy codes are pushing us that way. You know, in another 2 cycles, we're going to be there anyway. So it's really just staying relevant and reducing fear factor through gaining familiarity with some of these.
That's one of the problems that we face here. Our energy code here is basically Energy Star 3, and that's pretty low. That's something that is not really encouraging anybody to do high performance buildings. We have a tremendous organization here, which is called Efficiency Vermont, that since 10 years ago has put a comparison of all the different standards, including passive house, but that hasn't moved anybody in the government. So that's one of the things that we are fighting with, and we're talking with them. But I think I don't know. It doesn't seem to be resonating among the architects, and that's something that we have been trying to. I've been participating in many AIA Vermont events, but that still is not moving them much. So I don't know if we're not talking the architects' language yet.
I think you have to be dead to not get excited about a building that is heated by its occupants, that needs like little to no mechanical equipment at all, and it can just be the architecture. I mean, these things are super exciting for architects. Just might mean that they're not getting that.
That's what we think, I mean, but it doesn't seem to be. Right.
Just going to add one more thing on the architect side with AIA. So AIA has something called the 2030 Challenge. And depending on which chapter you're at, or if you're a firm, have joined that challenge, is to be carbon neutral by 2030. To put it in perspective, we've done one passive house, and that got us basically to meet where we should have been in 2017. So like our firm alone is way behind on the 2030 challenge. But what AIA Chicago has done was 2 years ago, if you were an architect in Chicago and you wanted to win an award, you had to at least sign up to be to the 2030 challenge. Now you have to report. So as we're reporting more, we're seeing where everyone's falling. And it is actually a big deal with AIA to be part of the 2030 challenge. And architects like to win awards. And if your chapter can say, you can't even apply for an award unless you've joined and reported, you may not get there, but at least you're on your way.
Yeah, we have been part of the 2030 challenge, and we have participated in all of those events. And our message to them has been always, I mean, why do we have to wait until 2030 if we can do it today? I mean, it's why do we have to build buildings that require deep energy retrofit? I mean, new buildings that require energy retrofit by the 2030 challenge. So, but it's still not resonating. I don't know what's happening here.
Great. Okay.
Enrique, let's talk. This is Kat again.
Yeah, I think Kat, we should organize some kind of event here for the AIA Vermont chapter to see if we can move those guys.
Sounds good. Will do.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, so I think James had a question.
Yeah, well, it's very much an observation, Terrell. Your rammed earth buildings are absolutely beautiful. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. So putting you on the spot.
Okay, well, that's because 5 of my slides didn't show. Anyway, yeah, I was working on your intros. So rammed earth is simply taking soil. So basically in Ontario, to give you an example, is within a kilometer of any job site that I have, I can find a gravel pit that will make me the soil that I need. It doesn't have organic material in it. So, but consider it like light concrete. So a typical concrete wall will have 10 to 20% cement. And that makes it a very brittle surface. So if you're doing it with 4% to 7%, depending on where you are in Ontario, that mixture is made with earth dyes, gravels, and sand and clay. And they mix it up dry, and they put it in a formwork that's about 18 inches to 20 inches thick. The insulation is already in the middle, and they have a little bit of fiberglass rebars, depending on the engineer's wishes and desires for that building or any seismic zones. And you need very thin people to get into these formworks. And they take 1 foot of soil and they will compact that down with tampers to 6 inches. And it can be made as straight as possible. It can be made as colorful as possible. And it can be made as wavy as possible, depending on the design. Within 24 hours, you can strip the walls. One of the neatest things about the rammed earth is that you can tell when they had lunch. So they'll start doing it and they'll have lunch and they'll be exhausted just before lunch. And then they come back and they do they pull it all in there. They put a little extra energy because they've had a sandwich, and you get a cold break and you can tell. So every day you can see when they had lunch and when they came back the next day. So it's kind of neat that way. I'm going to be on a site tomorrow afternoon and they're pulling off a 40-foot section of wall. So I'm pretty excited about that. And how you make the windows and doors inside is there are plywood formworks that go inside and they literally ram around it. And the plywood buck ends up being rammed right into the construction as it is. So then the window can it basically gets sealed and the window gets put in at in the sort of middle section where the insulation is. So it's a really nice, simple detail. One of the things we do to make it less expensive is make sure the window stops at the top of the wall so that you're not trying to do rebars and rammed earth above it, but it can be done anywhere. You can do it on the gable ends can be all in the rammed earth. At the end of the day, it works because it's thermally massive, but unlike concrete, it's really ductile. So with those two properties together, it has a much better thermal performance. And one of the things they've studied, there's an Irish, I can't remember his name, Irish guy who did a white paper on it. And with the 6 inches on the outside and the 6 inches on the inside with the insulation, the polyiso will never see a negative temperature. You have -20 outside in a Canadian climate, but it's sunny. The north side of the building will get sun and it'll warm up. But the ductility of it and the thermal mass qualities of it, that always wants to move. So it goes from the south side, it'll curve around the corner and go to the next side. So the building is always trying to be the same temperature. So overall on the sunnier side of the building, you'll have you can have up to a 5 to 10 degree difference from the actual temperature of the air. So if it's -20, it might extensively be a microclimate of -10. Then you have the insulation in the middle stopping that from affecting the building. And then you have your interior rammed earth. And so that rammed earth can see direct light or it cannot see direct light, but it also creates a microclimate of what's inside the house, and that's how it works. Typically, all of our buildings have a really fancy interior wall that's disconnected from all the other walls. And it's usually positioned so that the sun will hit it as much as possible. And we usually drop it from the top of the roof to allow airflow over it, and it becomes what I consider like an interior trom wall. So unlike an exterior one, which can cycle backwards at nighttime, this one is in the center of the house. It doesn't matter if it cycles, but it actually creates natural airflow through the building, which is kind of cool. And great, beautiful sunlight, patterns on the wall. See, I get excited when I don't have slides in front of me that don't work.
You said that you stalked us, but I have stalked your site for quite a while because I just love everyone to go and look at her site, at Terrell's site. It's beautiful work.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I do love the rammed earth. It is the one story I can tell you about rammed earth is I was at my first Phius conference in Portland, going to see the CLT manufacturer, and I'd never seen CLT before. So little caveat is I'm working with it now, but back then I hadn't seen it before. And the guy asked me, so what do you think is the most environmental material on the planet? And I looked at him and going, well, I just finished my first rammed earth building. The planet's called Earth. I'm going to go with Earth. ruined his day. Anyway, it all comes back full force because I'm now doing a lot of CLT buildings. None of them have been built yet, but in the next year, I think there's going to be either none or 5. So we'll find out.
Awesome.
Right. And Maren Longhurst has shared a link to Firewall, so that's helpful.
Yeah, Firewall is the company out in Salt Spring Island, west part of Canada. Yeah, so Firewall is a specific company, and they have distributors, and it's sort of a company thing. But structural rammed earth is done by many companies across. And we can even do homeowners making it, but mostly it's best if somebody knows what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Matthew Miller. If you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, I was just curious what kind of progress was made in Chicago as far as like doing outboard installation, as far as like getting variances and stuff. For setbacks for like row houses. I don't know. I guess that would be for Catherine Baker.
Yeah, we just actually have a new building code where it is starting to address that. So where you might have a certain setback, it's going to allow you to actually violate that and add the outboard insulation. So I'm not as familiar with the new code yet. It just came out, but I do believe I think Mark is on here He might be able to answer too. But yeah, the new code is addressing that.
Okay.
Well,
thanks.
and this is Kat. I'd like to also maybe ask Chris to share her experience because she pioneered that in New York City. So maybe she can share how she got it through.
Are we talking about insulation on existing buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it was a combination of an idea that kind of was having its time back when we passed it in New York. A relationship I had with someone on at our Department of City Planning, which is our zoning. He was a member of NESI, Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. So he was there. Yeah, okay. He was there on this little think tank thing, going to NESI, so he understood all the issues and really never had kind of thought about this before. So, you know, it seemed like it was a move that would serve everybody. You know, it served, you know, the city. They look like they're doing something great in terms of energy. It serves those of us trying to do passive house. It was like kind of like a win-win for everybody involved. And then for new construction, what we got was the ability to write off, if you have very thick insulation, after 8 inches, if your wall complies with the energy code or beyond, you can write off 8 inches of the wall thickness. So that I tried on a building that we just got passive house certification for, and I got 900 square feet back for the owner. It was like a whole apartment I got back. You know, and it was like, wow, this really works. So, yeah, it just, what I like about it is that it was a thing that we got into the code that wasn't punitive. It was actually a very good thing for everyone, which is how I like to see any kind of codes work. They're actually, you know, things that work for us, not things that punish us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So do we want to take any last minute questions?
We can.
I would just love to know, is Terrell, with your rammed earth approaches, are you looking at, or have you tried non-foam variations? And just in comparing that sire wall system that was just pointed out, they're pointing out the significant differences between their quality controlled process and a less quality controlled process. I'd just be curious to know what your experiences have been and quality control ideas.
Sure. I've worked extensively with the two companies in Ontario that have done it, and both of them have different methods. Quality control is very important. So you need an experienced person who has done some training in it. Aerocura is one of the companies. The other one is now called Ontario Rammed Earth, I believe. They just changed their name. And so so the foam that we do use in the middle, and I'm not a big proponent of foam, but I have to use it where I have to use it. The reason why they use it is because you're in there with these tampers and you can you can destroy the insulation because there's a lot of pressure going on. So to avoid it, but to still make a passive house, you're looking at a very large amount of something like a rock wool or other insulation. There's a job site up in Muskoka where one company the outer wall is literally 15 inches away from the inner wall. It's literally 2 walls. So you've got that added sort of complication to it. We do use recycled polyiso in our walls. We take it from the commercial industry every time they have to rip off a roof. It comes with a few holes in it, but we do patch that up and into the walls it goes. If we could find a water resistant, because you're never going to get to it again, natural material that we could stick in the center that we know that it's going to still be there, I would love to find it. I'm thinking of the higher density rock wool insulation, maybe just giving up a little bit on the insulation and maybe doing some testing, seeing if that works. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions, Lily?
No more questions on my end.
Excellent. So we don't have lots and lots of airspace. I would like to thank everybody for coming. I really, really learned a lot. I got to know these 5 other architects a little bit better. Hopefully they didn't mind my introductions. And now we have a great list of all the buildings that you guys love. So I'd love to do something with that, maybe an art project or something. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm supposed to be putting on these education things now. So let me share my screen one more time. Maybe this one will work. There we go. There's 2 pictures.
And then also, Terrell, maybe we can try to give the Alpen video another go because it's really
the Alpen video.
Cool.
Yes. That's not my
part. What they're doing with their new thin film glass.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave that to Lily to do. If she can't, she can have control. So I'm just going to show, did I show both of the slides here? I guess it's.
Yeah, and I can also put the number in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share so that Lily can try again.
I'm sending that in the chat for anybody who didn't catch that. And then let's try this one more time. Fingers crossed.
For 4 decades now, Alpen High Performance Products has been true to our mission of manufacturing the world's highest performance, highest quality insulated glass, window, and door products available anywhere on the planet. We've done so and will continue to do so. As the company completes our exciting move this month to our new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility here in Colorado, we invite you to explore our products and learn more about our vision of the exciting future for high-performance fenestration products. Each of our customers over the last 40 years have supported our innovative culture in their own way. We honor each of them now with our current family of products that prove the best is not yet to come. The best is here right now. I'm Brad Began, CEO of Alpine High Performance Products. We stand for quality, value, and innovation. We do not stand for the status quo, we stand for the future. Let's change the world together.
That's the perfect note to end on. Let's change the world together.
Perfect. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everybody who was here. It was a great evening. I now have to
Thank you,
go.
Terrell.
Oh, you're welcome.
Beautiful job.
Oh, if you'd only seen the real slideshow. Oh, well, we'll sign off now.
Well done.
Have a great evening, everyone. We will see each other again in real time. I'll be able to actually shake your hands next year.
Bye.
Maybe. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Very much, everyone.